Eric, I want to ask you specifically. We've got three superintendents. You're a board member. You sit with a very different perspective. How did this conversation come up in Kansas City, and what was the response of the board, or what have you done to help push this when your superintendent brought it up?
A large part of the conversation around this is taking place as more of a holistic community dialogue, and so there have been opportunities in the community to have these conversations. There have been opportunities in schools with parents. There have been because at the end of the day, the social-emotional thing arises because we have allowed our children to be harmed. We, as in you and you and you and you and you and you, we've allowed our children to be harmed to such an extent that now we have to come up with something, so that we can actually ameliorate some of the trauma that we've allowed them to go through. And we've allowed that. And we've allowed it for the same reason in El Paso that we've allowed it in Kansas City, is because we would rather have our children traumatized than take the steps necessary such that that is not the world that they are raised in. And so we like our children being wounded exactly the way they are, because that fuels our ability to have the other things that we want more than we want them to actually be prepared and to have an amazing life, a life that most of us have been blessed with. And so until we went out into the community and started having a conversation about what are all the ways that we are benefiting from the constant trauma that we subject our children to. You can't really build on much beyond that. The inauthenticity of it is staggering. And so that's, I believe, where this conversation about social emotional learning starts. It starts with our own complicit engagement in co-creating communities where our children intentionally suffer due to our choices. Only once we get present to our role in creating that, then we can start to question everything else that we've done along the path that's created a traumatic world for our children, a traumatic community for our children, such that we can create communities and schools that can really begin to benefit. You can't throw some social emotional programming and some restorative justice on top of a situation and hope that we gloss over, the racist situation that we've allowed our children to grow up in. That doesn't work. You can't use social emotional learning, as some lipstick, on the pig of classism and segregation. Until we're prepared to confront these issues that are just as alive in the hearts of the people in this room as they are in the hearts of the people in Kansas City, there isn't a strong path forward. And so in my mind, that's where we began this conversation in Kansas City.
So that seems kind of hard. Did you have pushback from the community to say, school district, you have not necessarily been a stellar district over the years? Are you just making excuses for not academically preparing our students? What pushback did you get as a community?
Well, let's find out. So I said one of my beliefs is that for student achievement outcomes to change, for our children to have the blessings that we want from them to have, adult behavior has to change. If you believe that, like I believe that, say all right. All right. Okay. One of our beliefs in Kansas City as we started to have these conversations was that for children to be successful, there had to be mentors engaged in their lives. If you believe that, say okay.
Okay.
If one of the things that we lifted up is that for children to get as far in life as we want them to get, that every day of their life and every hour of their life, they had to be surrounded by caring adults who were willing to be invested in the lives of those children. And we recognized that was a critical component of what it was going to take for children to be lifted up. If you believe that, say amen. Amen. So here's the underlying question then that we faced in Kansas City. I want you to think about the neighborhood, wherever you live, whatever city you live in, I want you to think about the neighborhood where children are suffering the most. I want you to think about the neighborhood in your city where the need is the greatest, where what children are coming away with, it doesn't look anything like what you want for them. I want you to think about the most troubled neighborhood in your city for children. And when you have that neighborhood in mind, whether you're sitting in the room or watching the video, when you have the neighborhood in mind where your children are struggling the most, go ahead and stand up. When you think of the neighborhood in your city where children are struggling the most, go ahead and stand up. Take a minute to think about it, but when you get present to where that community is in your city, go ahead and stand up. Now, if that is not where you live, sit down. Now stay standing. Don't sit, don't sit, don't sit. Stay standing. What I want you to consider is that we can have a lot of talk about what children need. And we can say, oh yeah, children need mentors and children need adults invest in their lives every hour of the day. And we could say that we want to put those needs ahead of everything else. But the choices that we make prove that we are deluding ourselves until we're prepared to confront the things that we do that benefit from perpetuating systems of oppression and trauma for children. Until we're prepared to confront our participation and our compliance in it, the rest of this is not going to be lasting and powerful in the lives of the children that we claim to serve.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's the conversation we began in Kansas City.